All right, Sean, let's talk about the SEC championship game. The theatrics were certainly there. Another wild overtime win for Georgia, 22-19. They're without Carson Beck for the entirety of the second half after he goes down with an apparent, elbow injury, the way that he was favoring his hand, comes in for a handoff on the final play, almost calling his shot, saying, hey, coach, put me in. We're going to win on this play. ETN pushes his way through unimpacted by the Texas defense. Look, both these teams are getting into the college football playoff. Both are good enough to show up and to compete. My first takeaway from this, Sean, I think that this is lame on Texas's part, that all the expectations are out there for them to go into the SEC championship game, win the football game, and then in the second half to go up against Georgia's backup quarterback who has extremely limited experience, and they could not get the job done. The most that they could do to rattle Gunner Stockton was the one interception that they produced, but that was not enough to help them win this football game. Quinn Ewers especially does not play well with the 2 interceptions and a number of sacks that he took in this performance. I'm not buying stock in Texas in the playoff. I do not have faith in Texas that they're going to be a team that is going to go on a run. Could they win their first round game? Absolutely. But I do not feel that this is a squad that is built and equipped, especially because who is playing quarterback, they need to turn to Arch, that I can put any trust in them.
For as frustrating as the Georgia coaching has been this season and in this game, they outcoached Texas today, which should be pretty hard to do. Georgia, I don't think, has outcoached many teams. But tonight they outcoached Texas. They had a beat on them. Texas was unprepared for a lot of things. Let's look at the fake punt. Should have never happened. If you are a locked-in team that is ready to go win an SEC championship, you have all hands on deck ready for a fake punt at all times, because this is what we're playing for. Georgia was playing for their playoff capabilities at that point with a quarterback down, their first stringer down, knowing if they lose, they could be on the chopping block. Just all the messy stuff like that, letting a second string quarterback walk you down and then have narratives start beginning about Gunner Stockton, which are irresponsible. But for the most part, Texas just did not show up. It's what we've been talking about with Texas, where, yeah, maybe they could beat the bad teams by a good amount, but there hasn't been a lot of really strong football that they've shown this year. And I don't know how many game balls you're giving out for this team in this loss. I'd give out 2, one to Matthew Golden, one to DeAndre Moore Jr. Right. They had fantastic days. They carried the team. They made huge catches. If you bet on Georgia, it was 2 and 0 that were plaguing you for the 60 minutes. Everyone else, though, you're kind of relaxed watching Texas just wait to implode.
Defensively, they had a really good first half, but as attrition started to set in for this Georgia offense, they started to chip away. The big 48-yard rush by Trevor Etienne and then Nate Frazier had a number of big carries. What's disturbing, maybe that's a little bit strong of a word, but what's disturbing is this hope that Texas's defense is so good and they're statistically the most disruptive in the country that you would think as soon as Gunner Stockton comes into the game, who's going to impact the game more as a runner than as a passer, and is also, as we mentioned a second ago, not experienced enough to be able to handle high-pressure situations like this. He played as well as he could have and did some really nice things. We'll talk about him in a second. But to allow 94 yards to ETN and 47 to Nate Frazier, 141 total yards rushing, and then the final play being a rushing touchdown, that's where the problems come into play. That's where the concerns come into play, that this whole season, it was hype for Texas. The one game where they were challenged against Georgia in the regular season, they played like crap, and then here we are. It takes overtime, and then you can't even get it done in overtime to score. I don't trust this Texas team. I'm just gonna keep reiterating that. I know it's redundant, but I can't help but being super focused on how fraudulent it feels like they are.
Here's what Texas fans are going to have to come to grips with pretty quickly, and they can't be full-on sour grapes after this loss because it was to a backup quarterback. If I was a Texas fan, Carson Beck played the whole game, and this shook out exactly like it did, I'd say, okay, the ball didn't bounce our way. We forced 4 fumbles on defense, recovered 1, and the ball bounced to Georgia. They were able to recover it that way. They earned their opportunities, and they just beat us. But since it was to a backup quarterback, and since you had so many opportunities, and since your quarterback threw 2 really not good picks. The first one, tip drill, weird pick. He forced it. Second one, same issue, forced it on the sideline. I get it, 3rd and long, that happens. Quinn Ewers isn't the first quarterback, especially in college, to try to force a 3rd and 10 plus and throw it to a defender. It happens. It's what quarterbacks do. But you can't stand on your pedestal and say that one was taken for us. All you could do is sit and stew and just understand that you lost this game. You lost it in every single facet, and you're going to have to come to grips with likely a not college football national championship coming to your doorstep in January.
Credit to Glenn Schumann for basically saying, you know what, Quinn Ewers, if you're so freaking good, come out here and beat us. 46 passing attempts for him. Only allowed 51 rushing yards to Trey Wisner. Total only gave up 31 rushing yards, so that's not sack adjusted. Negative 27 rushing yards for Quinn Ewers, so he found no lanes to escape. He was playing with the apparent bum ankle, so we don't know the total severity of that. This defense for Georgia is 1,000% good enough to carry them through the playoff. The quarterback situation is so complicated, though, right now. It seems like what happened with Carson Beck is serious enough that it's going to limit his ability to just grip and throw the football. He came onto the field for that final play, and his hand almost looked like it was just like awkwardly open to the point where he wasn't.
He had a Lego hand.
It looked like he had a Lego hand going on. They had alluded to, Herb Street had alluded to this looking like a Brock Purdy UCL type injury where he was hit in the way that he was favoring and just the way that he was operating and moving. If that's the case and he's unavailable, I don't know how much I want to trust Gunner Stockton. I got to give him 100% credit, though, for just finishing this game and making plays as a runner and being an athlete. I would imagine that the game plan for Mike Bobo is going to be really different than with Carson Beck. Is this a crazy shout to say that it felt like the offense had like a tiny bit of a different level of juice when he was in there because he could maybe be a good athlete and just run around?
Maybe it was because we weren't looking at the giraffe standing back there throwing the ball.
I'm gonna bring that up.
Well, he's just very tall,
okay.
But they were still dialing up.
You were calling him ugly. He's only 6'4".
They were still dialing up plenty of throws right to the flat and plenty of screen passes, just like Mike Bobo likes to do, which is excruciating, which I absolutely loathe. But now you have backup quarterback time, and is backup quarterback time when you want to start really challenging deep? Maybe once or twice a game. Maybe in the next game they try it. But for the most part, it's going to look a lot like nickel and dime Georgia that we've grown accustomed to seeing this year.